All right, here we go. What's going on, y'all? Ryan Mundy checking in again with another episode of the Blue Chip Academy podcast. And today we will be talking about redefining athlete representation. And also, Justin King, the man, the myth, the legend, is in the building to share his gems, his knowledge, and his insight. And really, we'll talk about like how today's athletes are being commodified more than ever, and really around like the support infrastructure or the lack thereof. And so it's a great episode for all those who are wondering around like what does this whole process look like as it relates to how can I best support my athlete, and what does this path look like, and who should we bring along the way to help build an ecosystem around the athlete. And more specifically in today's episode, we're going to dive into like why the current model is broken, the difference between chasers and builders. I would love to hear your perspective on that, Justin. And then also the rise in NIL and early asset management, right? Because a lot of folks are going downstream to get athletes, and downstream being middle school, high school, etc. And then we'll talk a little bit about like L.I.G Sports Group and how Justin is making waves and better representing athletes moving forward. But before we do all of that, man, how you feeling today, bro?
Man, feeling great. Blessed, man. We're here getting it rolling. Like the topic that we're talking about off of a holiday weekend. Sometimes it's like after a game, got to get back in the flow of things, little ice tub on Tuesday. But no, back into the swing of things. We're
Yeah, definitely getting back into the swing of things. I was a little slow yesterday, so we're actually a day late recording, but it's all good. We're
yeah,
gonna get
yeah,
it
we
out
here
into the
though.
world, and I hope all y'all had a great Memorial Day weekend. Summer is almost here. We were chatting about the weather before we hopped on. It is still rainy and gray skies where I'm at in Chicago, and it sounds like it's the same in Pittsburgh as well.
Absolutely.
Well, cool, man. Let's dive in and get right to it. And so, in this first segment, let's talk about like the broken incentive system, right? Because there's everybody has like a mouth to feed, a job, a role to play, etc. And specifically talking about like incentives with agents. And I think that there's just a huge knowledge gap as it relates to like what is the primary function and role of an agent. And also too, when you see like these big deals, even on a college level, these agents are getting like a nice piece of it, in between 1% and 4% of it. And then on the marketing side, which I always thought was egregious, is like 20% on endorsements. That that is crazy to me, bro. But would love to just kind of kick our conversation off there and just like hearing the opening thoughts as it relates to just like the agent ecosystem, the incentives that they have, and talk about some of the pain points and problems. But if there's anything to highlight, let's highlight those as well.
No, because you're absolutely right, and it's a super nuanced topic because like even when you start talking about the fees and how the structure is, once you start trying to navigate it within the bounds that are already set, you're already going to fall into some of the bad, I guess, the bad players, right? Because the position of an agent, I think, just to clarify for parents or coaches even going through it, a lot of times we give them all the power as like they're going to make us valuable, right? Like they're
Hmm.
going to be the ones that take us and walk us into the room with the decision makers and things of that nature, especially when we're introduced to them going into the NFL. Like that's like a
Yep.
point where everybody's getting to that moment where they're fulfilling their dreams, they're getting there, and now we just need to be professional and have someone that's vouching for us that can get us drafted. After working in the business my entire life and dealing with agents on the other side, that you start to realize that the institution or the teams have their own evaluation for what's going on, and there's metrics and points that you need to hit. Yes, there are some agents that do a good job with um, well, smoothing out the language, maybe getting you a couple more dollars here or there, and things of that nature. But that happens more so in the second contract. The real value becomes creating a valuable asset in the athlete, right? A lot of the work that happens at a younger age uh, with youth coaches and parents molding the athlete at home and their habits. But a lot of times we see this in other sports, how that asset is appreciated. When we talk about like tennis, maybe soccer, um, golf, where there's a lot of investment at that younger age to where like the business is introduced in a lot earlier to the athlete. So like even how they build their infrastructures is different versus football, where it's a game, it's a game, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, here's the business, and there's this guy coming to you saying, I can get you this much money, I'm gonna let your dreams come true, and there's just a whole spectrum of things that need to happen before an athlete is valuable. And that's what we're getting to in this day and age, because now that athletes can get money in high school, NIL is here, there's a new need and void for the athlete that is actually still developing into that full product, right?
Mm.
Because when we came through, in order for us to have representation or even be introduced to the business of sports, you had to be elite. You had to be considered in the top
Right.
2% by the time that an agent is coming to tell you that you're great, giving you money to train, do all these different type of things. Like you're a valuable asset. Now that that's happening, there's businesses involved, right? We talk about development businesses, talk about AAU 707, where they sell that same situation in an earlier stage period of the developmental or the cultivation process, where the athlete is still developing, right? And a lot of times that stunts the growth of an athlete, because there's a lot of rewards. You get the offers, you see the things that are happening at OT7, you see NIL deals, like there's real money being handed out based off of clout, and that's not the fundamentals of the business. So there's a lot of different things that it makes it nuanced to where everyone kind of points to like, hey, the agent is the person that we need to listen to, and like kind of misunderstand what an agent is there to do. They're there
Mm.
to negotiate your contract, right? Like that's
Mm.
really it. Like the NFL player advisor, NFL contract advisors, when they say NFL certified agent, they're a contract advisor. They're not a player advisor. They're not a career advisor.
Not player development. They're
Not
not
player
getting you.
development. They're
Yeah.
not mental health, not sports psychologists. They are a contract advisor. So there's like this umbrella
Mm.
that even that they get that says NFL certified or NFL certified agent, where it's just like you're not checking all the boxes that the athlete needs, but athletes or agents, they fill in those buckets with like, hey, we have all these different services going through the process. So I think the number one thing is families and parents need to know what exactly an agent does when you finally get there, right?
Mm.
And they're there to help secure and negotiate deals, but we understand that that's like the finish line, like the last 5 yards.
Yeah.
There's a whole
Yeah. They're like the
95,
cherry on the top.
100%.
They're
There's a
the cherry.
95 yards that need to happen before they even become somewhat valuable. And so that's where we
Yeah.
kind of come in to kind of help make that 95% or that 95 yards like a feasible activity go
Yeah.
after. You know what I
You know
mean?
what's interesting, man? Because I've seen a lot of agents kind of de facto step into that role of like, look, I need to be your business manager. I need to, quote, be your babysitter, all these other types of things that are not necessarily related to contract negotiation. And two things come to mind. One, that the lack of development along the way, right? I think that speaks to some holes either in the program situation, a lack of investment from the programs that the athlete was previously in, whether that be high school, college, from a personal development and also an athletic development perspective. But then also too, just the folks that are around them as well. Those could be family members, those could be friends, etc. And entering into this new territory, it's like you don't know what you don't know. And so when a athlete gets in front of an agent, there's a lot of patchwork that needs to get done, or there's gaps or holes that need to be filled in order to make sure that the athlete in and of themselves doesn't you don't get to the 1 yard line and then fumble. You know what I'm saying? Because there's so much work that needs to be done to get up into that point, and then you're right there. You're so close to the contract. The agent, I feel like, in a lot of ways, shapes and forms, steps in to kind of protect that value because they're like, look, man, like if you get in trouble or if you mess up or if you don't have what you need or if you're not taking care of your bills, etc., then that's messing with my money, right? And at
Right,
the end of
right.
the day, and that's what I was speaking to earlier, like there's an interesting somewhat alignment of incentives, but they're not really truly aligned at the end of the day. And really with again like a lot of patchwork that I think shows up and I say patchwork, but the reality is like I don't know if it's gotten better over the years or not. Like because if you see enough of the same thing, and agents, folks in the ecosystem are like, look, like here comes athlete number X again. And the same setup is like, look, I got to make sure this guy is good off the field. He has what he needs, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just wondering, is there any improvement in that area? Is there any development in that area, or is it still like just status quo?
It's status quo because the problem is it's a flawed system that creates flawed people, right? You incentivize
Hmm.
people to come into a system where it's like you get paid when the guy signs his contract. Like you don't get paid when he's going through the hardest time of his deal when he's trying to transition out of the game and find his next career. Like you don't get paid to help him do that, but you have to find that next player to make sure your bills stay on and do all that stuff. So like
Hmm.
the whole thing of recruiting or the whole thing of agency is essentially like a remote recruiting office because like that's basically what they do. They sign players, and then once they sign a player, they're guaranteed that 3%. So they're incentivized based on you playing. And a lot of players understand when they really need an agent is like when they're in the unknown. Like, hey, am I coming back this year? Does this team want me? I can't get a
Yeah.
job. Can you help me? And that's when everybody has that sick feeling when the agent stops picking up the phone until you realize the business, like they're not incentivized to pick up the phone. Like you're not making them any money. Like they're running a business as well. And like this next young pup that the business churn, like it's a business that churns,
Yeah. Churn,
they have to,
attrition.
yep, the attrition, they have to go back and get that hit from that 3%. And so that was
Yeah.
always the problem, I think, when you align, I mean, the athletes and the percentages, because I think it's like you said, it's a rose colored glasses type of thing where it's like, hey, we're aligned, but it's like only until you're not valuable anymore. So what
Yeah.
about making the athlete valuable? Because what I realized through my whole career, when I look back when I got done, I was like, yo, who provided the most value? Like where were the tent pole conversations that I changed my activity to get better? I started doing this. It was like my pops, it was vets on the team, and then they're like just different life experiences. But then there were certain pieces where my agent relationship was a little different. Like he was schooling me in the game since I was 14, 15 years old, and he didn't glamorize the agency game. He told me essentially how it was being used until I started feeling it. And you started realizing like, oh, it's not really like a thing. Guys can get into the agency game, say, I'm trying to help athletes and do these different type of things. But if your paycheck is coming from signing this guy that's in college next year,
Yeah.
right? If you're gonna get 50,000 off of him, you can't answer this phone call. Like you don't have time to answer the phone call for the guy
Well,
that's not bringing you
let
money.
me ask you this: who is responsible for development of the athlete?
That's the athlete is once you become a commodity, like
Mm.
it's to them to put that around them. And like athletes don't talk to their agents about player development, right? Like you might go to them for a
Mm.
second opinion, but like a lot of the agents that you speak to, like I only know about two that you can talk to about actually football personnel, like your gaps of staying in the league. Because once you get drafted, money. The goal in the league is
Yeah.
to stay there.
Got to stay there.
So it's like,
Got to stay there.
who's helping you identify the gaps and close the gap with like objective viewpoint? Because you got to remember the relationship changes once we become the product, right? Now everybody's trying to just keep your business. The agent
Mm.
he's not going to tell you to shape up unless the world's telling you to shape up because they need to get paid. They don't want to get fired and all those different type of things. So it's always been that gap of objective guidance for the athlete. Because
Mm.
think about it. When you're coming through the recruiting process, the high school coach, the 7-on-7 coach, everybody, like talk about the lead players, someone's trying to entice you to play for them. Everyone's telling you the greatest, they're ego coddling to an extent. Even when you're going through the recruiting process, like they can't really tell you the real what's happening because they need you to come to the school. Same thing with agents, right? Until that reality hits you when you're in the business and you're like, oh, we're here. And now I got to fend for myself to see how I can
Yeah.
do my thing. And that's the gap that I feel needs to be filled. But I don't know if agents are
Yeah.
qualified
Are
to
they?
do
And
it.
that's what I'm wondering. Are they the right people to fill the gap? You know what I'm
No, but
saying?
they
Because we. Okay.
no. I'm saying they're not, but they kind of commandeered that role based on the help from the
Yeah.
NFLPA, right? It was like, hey, our certifications of certified contract advisors is a safe thing, right? Financial advisors that are under our wing are the safe thing. Like those guys still steal and rob and aren't great people. You can get like a certification and still be a little shady, but it's about building that right infrastructure and team around you, not one person. And a
Mm.
lot of times agents come through and they say that we provide all these services. So that I think the gap is that no one's still trying to help these players develop because once they become a product, everyone treats them like the product. And so it's all about taking and extracting from that point.
Yeah. It's interesting too because that responsibility piece, especially when players are now being, I guess, targeted at a much younger and earlier age in their athletic career. Like again, if you're around folks who don't know any better, who haven't been down that path, then it's kind of like the blind leading the blind a little bit. And it shows itself as like this perpetual cycle. I think, and literally over this weekend, I was talking with a friend, and they were like, "Yeah, man, like it's down into middle school now as it relate from like an NIL perspective and just kind of like a recruiting perspective, particularly in basketball, where like these young kids, rising eighth graders, rising ninth graders, like they're making spreadsheets and databases and tracking these guys and building relationships at that age. And I was like, wow, like like that is kind of mind blowing, but also concerning again because you just don't know what you don't know, particularly at that young age. You're not even mature enough to handle a lot of life's responsibilities. But again, those who are around you, they don't have the experience and or the know-how. And then honestly, sometimes their incentives may be conflicted as well. And so like this I think responsibility piece and accountability piece on like athlete development is really really interesting, man. And I don't know if there's like one specific person. And also too, when I think about my own career, like it evolved over a period of time. Like my dad was the primary responsible party for the early part of my career, but there was a very distinct a time where I remember it kind of felt like a handoff a little bit. Like my dad wasn't as hands on or couldn't be as hands on anymore because he wasn't a coach at Woodland Hills, etc. But he trusted the folks that were kind of at the next stop at the train to take me to the next stop down the road. You know what I'm saying? And so it's an evolving picture. It's a moving piece. But again, now with like money, I think it really kind of complicates things. And and it creates a dynamic that wasn't previously there, but now is for sure there.
No, it is, and it has to be there because like when you say like your dad kind of handed you off, like that happens at all different phases, right? Like for me, that didn't happen until I got really to the NFL because like I was still in between like coaching, like the way the situation was at Penn State, I had more of a connection and like outside sources, whether it was my eventual agent sending me Revis film, sending me Champ Bailey film, talk about like that development. It was like an ecosystem until I got into the league. It was like you say, everybody kind of backed off to where, oh, well, you're a full developed guy, so you know what you're doing. The same way you go to practice, right? There's very little development focus because you're essentially a professional until you start to realize like you need an ecosystem approach. Like it's not one person that kind of leads that development. No, you need somebody that helps with your mental health. You need somebody to help with your player development. You need somebody to help with your nutrition. You need somebody to help with just like maintaining life off of the football of being a product. Because the main thing that I think people don't realize is that this whole ecosystem, regardless of sport, is like the commodification process that we talk about all the time. And now that it's happening earlier in the development process, it kind of stifles that growth. And so in order to continue to grow, we came into these hurdles when we got into the professionals. But now it's like, how are you developing that asset to withstand these different trials and tribulations that are going to happen, that we know are going to happen as adults, but now they're happening at teenage years? Because that's why I think it's so important for sports parents to be involved, informed, and put the right experts around your athletes to get the benefits of the sports game, because not only are there more opportunities, there's just more pitfalls as well to kind of stifle, not even stifle growth, but like really like hurt the
In your
outcomes of
career.
what you want. Yeah, hurt your career of
Yeah,
like
not
what
even
you're
get
ever
you
going to
there.
do. Yeah,
Yep.
100%. Because like when you were going through, what was your like take on when you like when the agent started to come holler at you? Like, because for me, it was like, oh, it was almost like validating that, like, oh, I'm good enough to go
Yeah.
to the league. Somebody wants to watch me. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So how was yours?
it was super validating, man. It was exciting. And back in college, when I was in college, it was not necessarily legal. Like there were rules and stuff around like contact, etc. But it was just like, all right, like I feel like I have an opportunity here, right? And like you see some of the draft boards and all that jazz, and you start to pair it up with these like random reach outs that you get and connections that you make along the way. It was like, oh, like this could be a real thing for me. But it's interesting when you say that because I was looking at that as the validating point or the agent coming in and saying like, okay, you're good enough, instead of me recognizing that within myself along the way. And there, like, external validation is very very important for sure, but it can't
It,
be at an expense of you not realizing like, hey, like I'm the value proposition. You know what I mean?
But it's not. It's because you've been getting external validation your whole career. They're the first people that bring monetary value to you, right? They're the first people that start talking about
Mm,
cash money. So it's a little bit
yeah,
different. It's like, all right, I'm good enough to get paid. So that's when we got introduced to the idea that we're worth money. These guys are getting introduced that they're to the game that they're worth money at like 14, 15 years old, and
that's wild. Yeah,
it gives a different sense of even where
yeah,
they're at. You know, guys want to start their own companies and do camps,
yeah.
and that's all
But
great,
is
and you
that the
take full
right thing though?
advantage.
Like there is value though, right? Like
There's
there's
100%,
100% value. Yeah,
and it's still
100%.
navigating
Players should
that value.
absolutely be valuable.
They're still navigating that value to get to the point because at the end of the day, the fundamentals of the business is still trying to whether maximizing all
Yeah.
these different opportunities throughout college or get into the pros. I mean, there's different ways to maximize, but you just don't want to stifle whatever your ceiling is for something else
Mm,
like, that's in front of you because it's interesting when you start to pay attention to other sports and how they approach the development process. You know what I mean? Because I
mm,
think we pay attention to football a lot and how it's treated where it's like, hey, this is a game. You guys go out here, but like, at tennis, like people are looking for outcomes, right? Like my daughter or her friends or whenever they're playing, it's like, oh, we're doing this to do this. Like, and
hmm
it's right in your face because of whether it's the investment to play, whether it's the individual sport aspect. There's a lot of things
mm.
within football where it's like like a
Feels a little
socialist type
fuzzy.
of socialist like type of upbringing. Everybody, we're all together. We're it's like us versus them, and then it just gets into this place where it's like, no, you're an independent contractor. Like now,
Mm,
other
yeah,
sports kind of prepare them to be that independent contractor because they have to go to a club sport, they have to go away from the school, and all these different type of
yeah.
things. So like the conditioning of even what they're doing is different than your average football player when they're just going through the school because there's like an assembly line, right? And
Yeah.
we're trying to
Let's
become
let's
all
let's
these.
talk about that mindset because you're absolutely right. Like I didn't have the or even really recognize the term independent contractor until I got to the league and money got involved. You know what I'm saying? But this whole time, in theory, in high school and college, the game didn't change. Like I was still playing safety, still playing on the football team, but now I'm an independent contractor. You know what I mean? And particularly in college where everybody got to wear the same clothes, it's like a group think mindset, etc. That is interesting. So, like, basically, would you say the independent contractor mindset now needs to be applied at a earlier stage in athlete development? Is that the right way to look at it?
Yes, and that's what's so tricky and hard for an athlete or
Yeah, because
family to
they're
navigate by
15 and
themselves.
14.
To
Yeah,
navigate by themselves, or even with a parent, because
yeah.
they think it looks like To doing sit-ups in his driveway to push back at a coach, but like not understanding leverage points, where you're at in the ecosystem, who has power from the high school coach, where you're at, and all these different type
Mm,
of things that you need to
you don't
set
know how to
up
move the pieces.
for you to have that leverage and treat yourself like an independent contractor. Because what a lot of times families give their kids or their young ones to the school, and then they don't have the infrastructure around them to even fill those gaps because they completely trust the institution. You know what I mean? And
Mm,
that's where it gets messed
yeah.
up.
You know what's interesting? It could be independent contractor or because we talk about like a CEO. Like you're the CEO of you. You are in charge of you, and as a CEO you are a business, right? Like if the money is now coming further downstream or earlier in a way, then you think like a CEO. Think about like
Yes.
you as a business managing yourself both on and off the field. And that really kind of comes into play with basically everything from your performance to like your exposure, like your brand, your social media presence. We talk about like compliance. I just mentioned like, oh, that wasn't necessarily legal. Some of the things that I was doing back then, but you got to keep yourself out of trouble. Like all these things, team dynamic, etc. Like having these young athletes start to develop a framework and a mindset around like running their athletic careers as quote like a business and thinking like a quote CEO is really interesting, and particularly for me because I transitioned into a CEO. So like that athlete to CEO type of narrative is one that really permeates throughout the business world, right? Like you hear this term called like this term corporate athletes, etc. Like
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
athlete mindset is a very, very powerful one and can position you if you tap into it the right way and build the right ecosystem and have the right resources available to you, man. Like the sky's the limit.
It is, because it's like all these different things that are happening in the ecosystem. It gives you a chance to develop a dynamic professional, right? If you're tapped
Yes.
in the right way, and because there's a lot of opportunities to create and like be blunt, like create an asshole that doesn't get anything from it because of the
Right.
different validation points or how the game promotes certain things. You know what I mean? Like whether it's how guys celebrate, whatever the case may be. But we all know that there's a level that you have to kind of protect yourself from giving too much information early on, because they have to continuously get better in that development process. So it's like having those shades when we talk about like a horse a little bit as they're going through to make sure that they're staying focused, because I don't feel like it's right for a 14 or 15-year-old to understand the business to the magnitude that I do. Because I think that's
Right.
where it gets really tricky, because then it'll mess you up.
Yeah.
But that's where we talk about the sports parent that has that intersector between them to kind of help those guardrails around what's going on. And as the athlete goes up, then the more they can consume and like relate, and then you kind of give them
Yeah.
more context of what's going on, because I think that's where it messes up early, when an athlete knows too much and then they have to go against the infrastructure of a coaching staff or whatever the case may be, because it's an individual journey in a team setting.
Mm.
That baseline is extremely hard to navigate in general.
Yeah.
Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. The team setting is really important, particularly as a CEO, because when you're running your own, when you're running the show for yourself, the key is you don't want to have to do everything, right? Like, and so surrounding yourself with the right folks and the requisite folks. But again, how are you going to do that? How am I going to establish like the agency as a 14-year-old to say like, I want you, you, and you on my team? You know what I'm saying?
That's why sports parents are
That
so
is,
important, because it's like
they're mission critical, bro. Mission
because like
critical.
that person can be a seven
Yeah.
on seven coach. That person
Yeah.
typically becomes a trainer, and everybody has ulterior motives in helping this person get the asset from point A to B. And when I say asset, that's the NFL. That's becoming a coach. That's working in the game. Everybody that operates in the sport has an opportunity to have a great career working in the sport, even out
Mm.
becoming a professional athlete, if they're geared in the right way with the right advisors, coaches, trainers, and things that like holistic development around. And I think that's the contradicting point, is that we're talking about a bottom line end goal win loss business, and we're talking about holistic development. That sometimes when we talk about holistic development, things that need to be developed don't necessarily help the bottom line. Yes,
Right.
ultimately they do, but it's about the actual individual and not just commodifying the product to get the outcome that you're looking for, because that's what's most profitable. Yeah, I mean, that was
Yeah.
probably the one thing I had to come to grips with at the XFL, was like, oh, these decisions are made this way because it's extremely profitable. So like, there's no point in trying to argue and face this. We just got to make sure you guys
And
develop, because
profitable from the organization standpoint.
1000% profitable
Yeah.
from the organization standpoint. And
Hmm.
that's exactly what you need to be. Yeah, I mean, because like they're trying to make money. So you got to understand, like, as a value proposition, what's the win-win for both of us? So you got,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And if you want to navigate this whole piece like an independent contractor and continue to have a job, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta treat it like a business in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. And I had a question around like, the organizational side of things. Like we talked about agents a little bit and like how they show up as it relates to interfacing with athletes and their personal and professional development, but also like again, because I asked like who's the responsible party here? And like I talked to a lot of kids who are going into college, and the advice, the main piece of advice that I give them is like, look, man, get everything that you can out of the whatever school that you're going to, because they're going to get it out of you. And everything that you can primarily means like make sure that you get a degree, make sure that you have some contacts, relationships, etc. But the role of organizations in the I think development, not only on the field, which obviously happens because there's a lot of investment that goes into these fancy weight rooms, the facilities, etc. But like the off the field portion of it, especially now again with this NIL era and this money is flowing, I'm like, man, like there's such an opportunity for organizations really to empower the athletes and make them better people, which ultimately will make them better players. But is that something that you're seeing out in the marketplace? Is it is the gap closing as it relates from like a college program who's investing in, tens of millions of dollars into athletes from a physical development standpoint? Are you seeing changes? Are you seeing movement? Are you seeing progress for that same energy and effort and resourcing to off the field activities and even post playing career activities?
I think you get box checking type of initiatives, things
Hmm.
that kind of show that these things are getting checked, right? Oh, we do an internship night, we connect the dots, but everything that even we speak about, like getting a degree, going to school and making sure that you take everything that they have to offer and not let them use you. I got to the point where I started to realize it's like, whoa, the how to do that is way more nuanced and tactical than it is that you think it's going to happen by osmosis. Like just like we talked about, like just speaking to a powerful alumni or building connections. Like a lot of times athletes don't know exactly how to do these things. So that's what I
Hmm.
run into when we talk about player development within the institution. Everybody's still there to win the games,
Where
regardless, even if you're a player
bottom line,
development person,
player development, agent, we all trying to win.
everybody's trying to win. Like, so
Yeah.
my whole thing, even working at the league office, like, yo, who is here just objectively for the athlete? Like, just to tell them the truth, tell them what they need to hear, help them have their back, even when they don't want somebody to have their back. Because we all know we get to a point where to smell ourselves a little bit when you become a professional athlete or have some type of status, but like how to do those things. I always knew what it was. Like, oh, I got my degree in 36 months. I made connections, but like how and connecting the dots,
Yeah.
that was hell. that was
You don't know how
that
to
was
you don't know how to use a hammer,
you
right?
don't know
Like
how
you
to
have
use
a
the
hammer,
hammer.
but you don't know how to use a hammer.
And so that's kind of my thing, is like trying to get
Hmm.
all these tools in the athlete's hands earlier and using those tools as you're going through the process on yourself, not to wield them against
Hmm.
anybody else, but you got to learn how to use the tools on your play set in high school. Okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to have. This is how I need to talk to a coach from just a earning trust. This is how I need to do. Go through the recruiting process. I mean, go through the recruiting process, man. That's like that's a business transaction. You're evaluating adults. Adults are evaluating you. Trust me, very cutthroat. There's money on the table. Like there's a lot of learning experiences when we talk about what exactly is education. So like just using this whole frame is like an educational tool. Like that's our whole, mission at L.I.G Sports Group, is use sports as a catalyst. But in doing this, it positions us to help represent the athlete, help develop the athlete, help holistically let the athlete reach their maximum value, because we understand all the different points and gaps that, I mean, the industry and systems don't want the athlete to have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that's where it gets a little nuanced in those different pieces throughout the game.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's a puzzle. You know what I'm saying? And the pieces of the puzzle, they feel like once you figured it out, like there's always a new learning to unlock. And a new way to maybe configure arrange the pieces to kind of make them work for you. Because when you were talking, what was top of mind for me was around like, this thing is going to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was reflecting on my own recruitment process, I was honestly super green. I was just like, hey, one, I knew I was good, right? So like I kind of had, to your point, like, walk around like, hey, you should be here, kind of type of thing, right? And but I didn't know or have like a solid understanding of like the conversations or like the perspective of that coach, or like when Lloyd Carr is sitting in my living room, what does that actually mean? All these other types of things that you just don't, it's hard to conceptualize as a 17, 18-year-old. But now, man, like you almost have to, because again, the stakes seem like they've definitely risen a bit because money is involved, right? And a lot
And
of
less roster
folks
spots.
and less roster spots, particularly for a guy who's coming out of high school. And that's something that that probably is an episode in and of itself. Like getting a scholarship out of high school seems like a dime a dozen, not a dime a dozen. It feels like it's exceptionally difficult to do now because a lot of teams and organizations are just like going to the portal. But it is something that I think needs to be addressed, and hopefully will be addressed around just like the role of organizations and programs starting to invest into their players, because ultimately a lot of these guys and athletes really go to school and leave empty handed, leave broken, leave underdeveloped, and don't even realize who they are, right? And how, again, sports as a catalyst, whether you played at Michigan, Penn State, North, I'm just whatever school it is, like how can you use that as a springboard to your for your life, as opposed to looking at it as an endpoint and it's not going to ever get better from here, because that's honestly what a lot of the messaging that kind of comes across is like, man, this is the best it's ever going to get, so you better make the most of it. Which I honestly never subscribed to. I was like, look, I could use this to go wherever I want to go, right? Because these are
Mm-hmm.
platforms, and platforms are meant to springboard off of, propel into what's next, not take a step backward.
If you know how to use the platform. And I think that's the messed up thing is when I worked at Penn State, which is like, I mean, we would graduate a lot of guys. It's a high academic institution, but I came to the realization, even working there, it's like, man, selling development here is almost a lie if you don't come in prepared with certain vision on what do you want to attack. Because if you come here trying to figure out, trying to develop, trying to get on the field, like you're like this before you know it, and you're out of there, right? Like
Yeah,
it's not
doing too
really a
much.
developmental
Yeah.
tool because you got to get on the field. And then
Hmm.
as we talk about roster cuts and bumping up, like if you're not getting better at your profession, at what you're there to, what sports you're there to play, they're going to be trying to, make it a little uncomfortable for you. So even when you think about that development, I started to realize like, you have to be like wired coming out of high school or earlier to even be
You
aware
got to
of
have a
the
plan.
to have a plan and be aware of the different opportunities to take full advantage of. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Because I think
Yeah.
I had a plan, and it was like, oh, it was a plan, and I thought it was a really really good one. But there were still tactical things that once I went through the whole business, I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Like I didn't know I
Mm.
needed to do operate with the coaches this way. I can't say the coaches. I was always good with the coaches, but more so outside of the people that dealt with me in
Yeah, just the
football.
university. How do I use the university to
How
my
do I use the
advantage
university and all these things?
and all its resources?
Because now you're in the football building 25 hours, right? Like it is a professional operation. Now you're getting paid to do certain things. So there's different requirements that move away from like the old adage of development. And I think that's critical even when guys are picking high schools now because you can tell the philosophies of head coaches that really lean into that development. And if you're not built for the other place, man, you gotta you gotta
Yeah,
figure it out. But
it's gonna be tough.
nah, but that's why we call
It's
ourselves
gonna be
sports
tough.
asset management and advisory and not like an agency or even sports management group. Cause like to get like the idea they're trying to transition into the framework of thinking of yourself as an asset in a healthy and holistic way in a cutthroat bottom line business is way
Mm.
trickier than people think.
Yeah, yeah, because it could show up. There's a very fine line. It feels like at times between empowerment and coddling. And if you're not careful, you could very much so uh, think that you're walking into an empowering situation, or at least have a mindset and expectation of like, look, this place is here to develop me. This place is here. I believe in it, my coaches. I believe in the resources here. But if you don't have the wherewithal, the presence, and the awareness to like figure out how to like piece that puzzle together to make it work for you, then you'll be grouped into the herd, and the herd gets coddled. They just get ushered around, do the same things, but we are not the same. You know what I mean? Each player on the team is an individual that has specific needs, wants, desires, and interests, etc. And at universities large and small, it's about like finding what works for you, right? And so how can you tap into the schools, universities, and again, not be coddled or ushered around and have this like groupthink mentality, but how do you like flip the switch and that mindset to really start to think about yourself as an independent contractor, a CEO, who's a part of an organization, who's a part of a team at the end of the day. But you know what I'm saying? Like you still got to figure out like what makes you tick and what's going to work best for you at said time, at said university.
That I mean, that's 1,000% true because they have to realize, like, even when you're saying you're a CEO and you have a business, that's what's always told, and we kind of preach. That's like the name, image, value to name, image, likeness. You have to earn the right to be a CEO. You have to earn the right to even have leverage
Got
and
to
you
climb
can't
that
even go
ladder.
around and
Yeah.
say that, right? So that's what a lot of guys will start to think in high school when they're not that good and like, oh, I'm a CEO because this is the business opportunity. This is what I need to do. And like, but you haven't been a great worker yet. You haven't got promoted. Like, so from that piece, like that's the part of the developmental process when I'm talking about middle school and high school that you still need to absorb to become the CEO that we're talking about. Sometimes those things are skipped in football. You can be rewarded in it. We'll talk about another day, but other sports you can't skip that because it's a genetic and trait based sport. But other sports you have to hit certain marks in order to get there. So sometimes you're not
Like a
learning these
ranking or
a ranking
yeah.
or just the fact that like yeah you're just not going to get onto a golf course and athletically beat somebody that's been practicing 5
Yeah.
years longer than you. right? In
Right.
football, you can come out, step out there, you 6'2", 250. I mean, you're a good football player, so I'm not saying you, but like someone of your stature, and they can get out there like, oh, we'll offer that guy. You don't know why they're recruiting you. It's like, I just think he's a beast. I don't know. If you ask a soccer player,
Okay,
tennis
I got you.
player, a golfer,
Yeah.
or any other sport, they know exactly why they're getting recruited and what it is that they're like good at and what they've been working to craft. Because skill based sports versus genetic and trait based. So that's why I think it gets even trickier when you're talking about like the developmental process and having people in your corner that are given objective evaluations. Like I do that for a living. So I think that's even the separator where we come in is that like identifying the right gaps. Do you know what I mean? To make sure that
Hmm.
you're valuable for a long time.
Yeah. How do you think players start to understand this?
Introduce them to the business earlier, right? And I think that's kind of our whole like philosophy, even when we talk about speed brings opportunities, right? So if I'm talking to 10, 11-year-old athletes, they're they're going to be introduced to me and talking about speed as currency. It's like them having value. If you want to be valued, you got to learn how to run fast. If you want to learn how to run fast, then you can do these things. And so connecting different attributes to essentially cash or value in the business, I think is the starting point. Once you go there, then you start to fill in all those other pieces because that's your foundation that underwrites your career. And then you start learning about the evaluation process of what you're getting checked, getting evaluated on. It's like taking an SAT test. If you know exactly what's going to be on there, you would prep for what's going to be on that test. And I'm just trying to say, like,
Yeah.
hey, this is the test that you need to do to get into these higher levels. Let's just knock
Yeah.
these out. You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
introducing the business earlier and earlier to the kids in the right format, whether it's through specialized curriculums in school, whether it's outside resources for your high school education, or just like true holistic player development, like for the business and merging with the player development on the field or in the competitive arenas. That will give them, I think, a baseline to be able to take full advantage of everything that happens in college and beyond.
Yeah. And
You know what I mean?
is that what you mean by like a build mindset? Like building the athlete up along the way, establishing a foundation, and really doing it brick by brick, piece by piece, because you can only do it one day at a time. So, like, look, let's lay this brick right here and see you tomorrow.
It's growing a tree, right? Versus guys that are trying to run around, or if I was an agent and had to operate like an agent, I'm just looking for like who's the best one, who's already
Yeah.
going to be the first round draft pick next year, and I'm going to get close to him after he's already gone through the fire. And it's like no, but the hard part is going through the fire, and then once you get into the big fire, like how do you stay in there and continue to get out of it? And a lot of
Mm.
times, I think that's a gap that is lacking in all sports. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I can't even say all sports because boxers, like they have their team, it's them and a squad around them. Tennis players, them, squad around them. F1 racers, them, squad around them. Football is the only one where it's just like you, the team, and then it's just like an agent. You know what I mean? So it's like how you build that process up is just extremely critical.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Man, you got me reflecting on just like my whole, and honestly, like building a team. We're sitting here talking about it, like the steps, and in theory, it makes sense, and at times can feel simple, but in just my own reflection, like there are areas and opportunities where I'm like, man, I definitely could have been more intentional about building a better team, or having the right and or additional resources around me. But a lot of that too was kind of my own hubris that got in the way of
A
like,
lot of
oh,
times.
I think I'm good. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times when you think about some of these athletes, you think about the extreme, right? Like you think about either the extreme spender or the guy that's on the fringe who's constantly in trouble, but is a supreme talent, etc. And but there's a very real reality for athletes who don't kind of fit that mold. Still great athletes in their own right, but just like, look, I got this, I'm good. And that was me. Like I'm like, you ain't got to worry about me getting in trouble or anything with the law. But like, I feel like I'm smart enough to kind of understand this. Like I could do it. You know what I mean? Like I want to learn what these people are talking about, etc. But that's what I was saying earlier around like, man, sometimes you gotta one, make sure that you understand and know, but then two, there has to be like a constant feedback loop, constant communication, And I think just like a builder's mindset that's agreed upon between both parties, right? Like whether it be your tax attorney, whether that be your agent, whether that be your financial advisor, like there's a huge opportunity to empower, to teach, to educate, so that you can know for yourself. It's like, you know, the adage, teach a man to fish. Like teach
100%.
men to fish, and then you know their lives will be more fulfilled, richer, stronger, etc. But I was sometimes trying to teach myself to fish,
Yeah,
and it was like, bro, like you know, but you don't know. You don't have that lived experience.
you're 100% correct. Cause I left Penn State. I was on Dean's list, so even like, this academic stuff is easy. I graduated 36 months. I'm not talking about me
Yeah,
until you
I'm good.
start.
That's not me.
That's not me until you
Yeah,
like, oh shit, it is me. Like I
yeah, it's
need
definitely me.
this,
One
that, and the
thousand percent
third.
me.
And it's like, and now it's just happening sooner and sooner. And I think it's really important when we talk about that empowerment because you're getting judged as you're going through the business to even work in the business and how people view you. And I think like being equipped not only gives you confidence, it empowers you, but it gives you like the tools to use sports as a catalyst because that's not just a osmosis birthright that you play and you get things from this game. Like you have to be prepared
Yeah,
and strategically positioned with the right people around you to be able to see it. And that's what we try to do at that's what we do at L.I.G
yeah,
Sports Group. You know what I mean? Sports asset management and it's critical. As sports asset, you got to make sure that the holistic viewpoint is
yeah.
on point to reach your
And that
maximum
viewpoint is important because what my thought is that like a lot of times as athletes, we have a viewpoint on how people look at us from a fan perspective, right? Like it's either online, it's on social media, it's your family members talking in the ear. And that could be a totally different viewpoint with a different lens, perspective, expectations, and the ones who are signing the checks and making the decisions. And it's really that nuance and that difference of you know viewpoints that one you just got to like be aware of like hey there's another side of the viewpoint that I need that's important to this whole equation, but then two like finding the ways to develop yourself and also the tools building yourself up to understand like what those folks are saying and how you can use that feedback loop to ultimately advance your career.
I mean, that's it. Because find the gap, close the gap. Like that's how you become a desirable asset in this business. Whether you want to become a professional athlete, you want to work as a coach, trainer, work as a in corporate America, or whatever the case may be. People invest in, you know, like
Yeah,
desired growth, right? Like if you know how to grow in this business, I think that's where athletes really need that support, and that's the support that we try to provide at LIG. And especially when you start coming from like a tactical personnel standpoint, like being able to talk to you about the business from the development side, from the business side of monetizing your likeness and development and whether you are as a sports asset, but also being able to get under the hood and help you develop as an athlete holistically is something that we just do a little bit different. Like you said, that's the building mentality versus the chasing. I feel like going after finding an agent is a little bit chasing. Going out searching for offers is chasing. We always talk about maintaining our power internally and understanding what things we can pull on our own accord. And I think when you do that, that's really empowering. And once you get through this whole jungle, you get out as a different type of beast. And that's what we're trying to produce, create, and help guide here at LIG Sports Group and Blue Chip Academy.
here we
Yeah.
go, man. Well, that's it for this episode, y'all. Just to kind of recap, the game has changed if you haven't noticed by now, and we're here to break that game down for you all. Models are changing; they're broken. Conversations need to happen, but really, it's all centered around like making sure that athletes feel empowered and supported along their journey, and have a new and involved and engaged type of partner moving forward to really help them maximize opportunity. Because that's what it's all about. We're here to win. We're here to maximize opportunities, but it's all about how you go about doing that. So if you're an athlete, a parent, a coach, and you're asking yourself, like, you know, if you're circling around the wrong people, if something in your gut is just letting you know, like, something feels a little off here, then you know, right? And that's your call to action to gut check where you are with things and who's supporting your athlete. And if you're the athlete, who's supporting you. And also, if nothing else, make sure that you check out L.I.G Sports Group because there are resources available to you. Blue Chip Academy, there are resources available to you. So until next time, we'll check y'all out next week. Hope y'all have a blessed one. See y'all soon.
And we out.